everybody for coming here today. You may be wondering why I'm holding this microphone, but it's because we're actually live streaming this whole event on YouTube right now for anybody who's in Moncton at the Vennture Garage that also exists there. So big thanks to Airfoot for coming in 2 days' notice to make this happen for the folks in Moncton. So today we have James Mullinger, who a lot of you probably already know, but if you don't, he's a comedian from the UK who is really, really good at promoting himself, and he's built a business here, having come here, you know, fresh from England and coming into our community, which is notoriously kind of known as being difficult to break into. And he's done it in a really successful way, selling out 2 shows at the Imperial Theatre and working with lots of people in the community. So we thought it'd be of great value to the entrepreneurs to hear from James about how he did that and how he made his business grow and thrive in St. John, New Brunswick. So we're going to bring James up now, and if anybody wants to tell their friends about this, we'll have this on YouTube later this afternoon for them to watch. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone, in St. John and Moncton. Hi, Moncton. Very nice to be honoured to be kicking off this series of fantastic talks. I think the main point that I'd like to make just from the outset with regards to personal branding and why I've always done all of my own PR is that it doesn't stem from having a humongous ego. It simply stems from economics. And it was simply that friends of mine in the UK, comedians that kind of got to the point where they were needing to kind of push tours and push TV shows and everything else, all had budgets or indeed unlimited budgets that meant that they could hire PRs for those things, hire publicity teams, all the rest of it. For me personally, that has never been an option. So I always found it better just to do it myself. And that has then led into a situation whereby I'm kind of quite controlling over it. In that I believe, and this isn't to say that I have a problem with people that hire publicity teams or hire PRs, and I certainly value the work of all of the people in those industries. But for me personally, if I'm PRing a show, no one wants that audience more full than A, the person who has financially bankrolled the whole thing and stands to lose a lot of money if no one shows up, and B, the person that has to stand on that stage for 2 hours that night and make everybody laugh. Because you know for a fact that a half-empty room is going to be far harder to please than a sold-out venue just packed to the rafters. So the fact that I do it all myself stems from those 2 points. I am going to explain to you why personal branding is important. It's important for 2 reasons, and I can understand why some people think, oh, but I'm part of an organization, so why is it relevant to me? Well, I'll give you an example how. On the one hand, you've got a person like myself, where my brand, essentially, even though most of what I do has never been particularly strategic, most of it has happened organically. All I've ever wanted to do was to perform stand-up. It's my passion in life, and I want to be able to continue doing it and support my family doing it. That's all it is. I'm not a marketing genius. I don't have all the answers. I haven't studied this stuff. My degree is actually in women's studies, so the only thing I'm actually qualified to do is feminism. So if you want to hire me for feminism, I am absolutely qualified for that. But anything else that you want to hire me for, I'm not qualified for. I'm not even qualified for comedy, other than the fact that I put the hours in to learn the trade. So my personal branding is relevant to myself because I am my own brand. Like if you want to hire James Mullinger for a show, well, it's me that you get. My company name is my name. Everything about it is me. But it also is relevant to another company, and I'm sorry to use someone in the audience, I hope Steve won't mind. Steve Barnes in the audience, who is the fantastic and brilliant gentleman who is opening up the first comedy club in St. John. He's opening up a Yuck Yucks here in a few months' time. An amazing man, yes, definitely deserves a round of applause for that. Now, Steve is an example because Steve is, of course, about bringing a franchise. So he's bringing a huge brand, Yuck Yucks. We've all heard of Yuck Yucks, right? We've all heard of it. We know what it is. He's bringing that here. That name is, of course, the name of the company. So why is Steve Barnes' personal branding so important? Well, the reason being that not just anyone can get a franchise and bring it somewhere. That person is the branding behind that club. So, for example, Steve has put on 6 shows shows in St. John as a tester and to show people how successful that this club will be. They've all sold out. Now, yes, partly they've sold out because of the fact that it has the Yuck Yucks banner above it. But if no one knew about it, no one would show up. The reason that people were there because Steve Barnes, the person, went out, knocked on doors, met with people, and personally pushed those tickets. So already he is the face of Yuck Yucks in this city, which is why that personal branding is important. Even though Mark Breslin's Yuck Yucks is the company within St. John, the reason that you're all going to go is because Steve is there behind the wheel, steering this thing, and that you all trust him. And similarly for comedians coming to this city, they come, they perform, they have fun. Steve, more so than most promoters, looks after his comedians. Bearing in mind, most comedy clubs you play in this country, you turn up, they won't give you free water. In Steve's dressing rooms, you get lobster rolls, right? So, that's a true St. John entrepreneur right there. Any comedian, and I'll give you an example of how this personal branding can work nationwide. I was doing the Yuck Yucks in Toronto a few weekends ago, from like Thursday through till Sunday. On the Friday, one of the Toronto comedians was performing at Steve's Club here in St. John. On Sunday, he is opening for me at the Toronto Club. Now he arrives at the club telling a dozen or so comedians in the dressing room about how, this guy's been in the business 15 years, and he's going, oh my God, I've never been treated so well. The guy there, Steve, he gave us lobster rolls, gave us beers, blah, 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 blah. He'd never heard of something before. So basically that is a local businessman here spreading himself, becoming the brand. So that's why it's relevant. I hope you don't mind me using you as an example there. I'll tell you back to the beginning about how I started. For those of you that don't know, I've been a stand-up comedian for almost 11 years. I started in 2005, and interestingly, I've only lived in this city for 2 years. But my comedy journey definitely began here. In New Year's Eve 2004, I was visiting here. My wife's from here. She grew up on the peninsula. Her parents lived there and still live there. Now, we would come here every year and visit. Now, in 2004, I was very unhappy living in London. My life wasn't going how I wanted it to. I was essentially having something of a quarter-life crisis, if you will. And I think I'd always wanted to be a performer. I always wanted to be a comedian. I just hadn't had the confidence to actually pick up the mic and do something about it. So New Year's Eve 2004, I'm here, and St. John was always the place that, and I was only thinking about this yesterday, and it's an odd thing that my life's kind of finally fallen into place living here, because this was always the place that I came to reflect. In the same way we always have, this is why I love when I hear about companies having kind of away days that involve just people being able to sit and think. We all have our best ideas when we're relaxed. All of my best ideas that I've ever had, like the time that I have been on holiday. Like I would be in the rat race in London, busy office job, all the rest of it, and all of my best ideas stemmed from being on a beach somewhere. And so for me, coming to St. John was always my respite. It was my time to relax and think and reflect and decide what I wanted to do with my life. So this New Year's Eve, we went to watch the dinner theatre on Water Street, right? So we're in there, and it's packed, and these kids up there performing were just doing such an amazing job. Everybody in that audience was transfixed by them. We were laughing, we were clapping. And I sat there like in awe of them and impressed by them and enjoying it, but still feeling that kind of performer's angst I was jealous. I thought, well, no matter what they're doing during the day, no matter where they're working, doesn't matter how much they might hate their jobs during the day, at night, they are living their dreams. They have us all enraptured. And I was so in awe of them and just so much admiration for them that I went downstairs to the bathroom shortly before midnight, and I'm a habitual list maker. Every day I make a list of things I have to achieve by the end of the day, and if I don't achieve them, I will stay up half the night doing it, and I will be hugely depressed if I don't finish it. So yeah, you're the same, right? Very, very smart. That's why you're here. You made a list, you said, I'm going to go and see James Mullinger today, and you're here, right? And for me, New Year's resolutions, same thing. Some people think New Year's resolutions are silly. I don't. For me, I make a list, and if it's written down, it has to be done. So I went down, and it was shortly before midnight, and I looked in the mirror in the bathroom at the Water Street Dinner Theatre, and I swore this would be the year that I would try stand-up. Now, oddly, a few other things conspired to actually make that happen, but it took me 5 months to actually do it. And in May 2005, I finally did my first gig. So it's fascinating that I end up here, and since I've lived here, I've done a few corporate gigs, and it's quite at that dinner theatre for Moosehead and for Revolution. With Terry Ridley's here, and other companies there, and it's odd going to back in that bathroom and thinking this is literally where it all began. I'll zip through this because this isn't kind of what we're here to talk about, but the following 5 years were essentially me travelling around all of the country, dying every night. Like that's the reality. Stand-up is not like being a musician. Like a musician masters the craft of playing guitar. When they've got it nailed, they get on a stage and go, Dan, right? Look at what I do, right? A comedian can't do that. You can't perform in front of a mirror. Stand-up is only learned in front of a live audience. So it's an odd thing, and it's an odd thing also personally, when suddenly you come home one day and you say to your wife or girlfriend, you say, I'm going to take up stand-up comedy. And then they go, oh, right, so I'm going to see less of you, but I guess we'll have a bit more money. No, we're going to have less money because I'm going to be out 3-4 nights a week, travelling around England, probably missing the last train most nights, sleeping rough, spending a fortune on travel, accommodation, food, not getting paid. And so you're going to see less of each other. We're going to have much less money. And guess what? The 2 days a week that you do see me, I'm going to be manically depressed because I'm going to be booed off stage for the other 5 nights of the week, right? That's a tough sell, right? And you know, my wife is of course incredibly supportive now that the money's rolling in, but she wasn't back then. But that's fine. And that really was my trajectory. And it's no different. Every single comedian has been through the same process. It's the only way to get good, and it's one of the reasons that I love stand-up is that no one falls into it. There's no one doing stand-up comedy that kind of goes, oh well, I found myself doing it, and would you believe? Like no one goes through 5 years of debt and being booed off and the hatred from. No one can go through all of that. And there's very few jobs that, I kind of equate it to kind of, it's almost like, 7 years to be a doctor or an architect. It takes 7 years to get somewhat good at stand-up. And it took me all of that time. Now, to jump ahead, I reached a point where I was the best on a new act night, Bill. Like you basically reach this point where suddenly you're the best, but then you're not good enough to play the club. So it's this kind of tough thing when you're storming a gig of new acts, but then suddenly you go and play with the big boys, and suddenly you crash and burn because you're not as good as them. And so you keep building and building and building that way. Now, I reached a point where I was getting enough club work and so forth. I'd kind of missed my opportunity to be the hot new thing. Like that wasn't going to happen for me because I was so bad at it for so long that I was never going to be the kind of oh my God, who's this new guy? Isn't he amazing? That ship had sailed for me. But I wanted to start touring. So what I did, and this is where it comes back to personal branding, is that in England, the comedy scene there is just rampant. There's a boom happening right now that has been going on for about 10 years. Everyone said it wouldn't sustain, and it has. And the boom was basically whereby comedians would get a couple of TV appearances, and for whatever reason, some would, some wouldn't, but a huge proportion for such a tiny island would suddenly be propelled to playing arenas. And by that, I mean like 20,000 seaters. Now, to give you an example, Michael McIntyre is currently the biggest comedian in England. When he does an arena tour, he does about 30 dates in 20,000 seaters. Madonna can only do 10, right? Now, if you look at how much it costs to put on a Madonna show, hundreds of dancers, costume changes, lights, right? And all those people she has to pay, and she's doing 10, he's doing 30, and it's just him and one of these, right? The money that is happening there right now is beyond insane. And of course, this became this huge thing, and there's comedians touring everywhere. But the one thing that had never happened was that really only comedians with a TV presence were able to tour. Now, I wasn't able to go and do the Edinburgh Fringe every year, which is where everyone goes to kind of get noticed, get recognised. You pay a lot of money. It basically costs you. You pay about £10,000. You go up. You get none of that money back, but you might get noticed. Well, my mummy and daddy weren't rich. I didn't have that kind of money to do that, and I needed to work the month of August, so I couldn't do that. So I decided to make my whole year a Fringe. So what I would do is I started booking tours of solo shows. I felt like my style of stand-up was more suited to a 70, 80-minute story than it was these 20-minute club sets full of drunk, bachelor parties. So I would turn up, I would find, say you've got a big city like, say, Leicester, and I would then find a city 20 minutes away that didn't have as much going on, but had a small community theatre. And I would book that theatre. So I would book tours based on that. Now, obviously, being a tiny island, what it meant was I could show up at those places, walk up and literally do it all face-to-face. And that's how all of my branding has always been done, face-to-face, one-on-one. Now, to jump ahead, this essentially what I did was I built a business from the ground up, doing those tours on my own. I didn't have a tour manager, didn't have anyone else. I booked the support act, I booked the theatre. Once it was booked, I would turn up at the local newspaper and say, hi, I'm a comedian, I'm doing a show at your local community theatre or your community hall or your church hall, wherever it was. Do you want to do an interview? And they said, yeah, if you come back in an hour. And I would turn up at all the news agents and put up the posters myself. It was all done. And I would, again, go back there a week before. Now, what happened was, just to speed this up, was the first show I did this was in 2009. It was my first show. It was about my life as a male feminist, and it was called The Bad Boy of Feminism. I toured that show. It got recognised enough that I then started getting booked to perform it at bigger kind of London venues, a place called the Soho Theatre, quite a prestigious place. And it built up enough momentum that then suddenly the following year, when I wanted to do the same thing with my new show, which was called James Mullinger's School Days, obviously about my school days, I was able to, it was slightly less work. I would turn up at the places, I would still do it all face-to-face, I'd put up the posters, but the people that had come to the show the last year who'd seen this comedian they'd never heard of before, suddenly they're telling their friends about it. Oh, we saw this guy last year, never heard of him before, he's not on TV, and it built and it built and it built. And basically it got to the stage that pretty much the 2 years before I left England, I wasn't needing to turn up there at all. I would put the tickets on sale, I'd do some radio interviews, some press, again, all booked by myself, by phoning up those places and contacting these contacts I'd built up. Now, I can't take credit for all of this. A lot of this, this business model, if you will, actually stemmed from Russell Peters' business model, which is that obviously one thing everyone talks about is Russell Peters, how his YouTube video of his somebody gonna get hurt real bad comedy routine went viral, which of course was something that definitely helps them. They of course claimed that it wasn't strategic. Of course it absolutely was. That's what they hoped would happen. But the real brains behind what Russell Peters did is something that his brother did and orchestrated, which was that they went out and every single show Russell did, they collected email addresses of people that enjoyed the shows. And this is the crucial thing. When you go and do anything, right, we all have very short attention spans. If I go and perform a comedy show in a comedy club, and I'm just one of a few comedians on a bill, someone leaves, they forget your name, they forget all about you. That's it. What they would do is create a database of emails, so anytime Russell arrives in a town, then they just fire off that email, and all the people, they've got this kind of small but fearlessly loyal group of people that love what he does, who come back. I'll give you an example. So I don't have a business card. What I had done was I had a CD made on the basis that after a show in a comedy club, so I go to Yuck Yucks in Newfoundland, do a show, of course, people might come off, and 6 months later, someone says, oh, we need a comedian for our corporate event. Who was that English guy? Oh, I don't know, Google it. English comedian. Oh, no luck, right? But you produce one of these things. Yes, they cost $4 each to make. Of course, it's quite an expensive business card to make. But a business card that costs you 10 cents that ends up in the bin every single night by everyone you give it to, it's not worth anything. For this $4, someone buys this, they take it home. Even if you give it away, they take it home, it's on their shelf. A year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, whatever it is, someone says, look, we desperately need a comedian for this big event we're doing. And someone goes, oh, we saw this great guy at the club a few months ago. What's his name? Hang on, I've got the CD. And there it is on the shelf. And it's an expensive business card, but there it is. And that, for me, is what it's all about. It's about people actually remembering your name. It's because it's not always going to be immediate. And I think one of the mistakes that comedians and a lot of business people make is they think too much about the here and now and the today. Someone might not want to book you or do business with you today, tomorrow, but it could be in 5 years or 10 years. And the more of those people you build up that have your name or the name of your company in their head, the more that is going to grow and evolve. And essentially, it all boils down to grassroots and an organic approach, which is the same approach that I've used here with both Imperial Theatre shows. When I first moved here, a lot of people from here said you won't be able to carry on doing what you're doing in England. You won't be able to make a full-time living as a comedian here. Luckily, they've been proved wrong. Otherwise, I'd be on a flight home right now. And almost everything I've ever done, people have been, not everyone, but some people have been somewhat cynical about. First time I did the Imperial, they said, oh, you won't sell out the Imperial, local guy doing that, no, it's not going to. And then second time I booked it, everyone said, oh, but everyone's already seen you. And of course, a lot of it is down to writing new material, coming up with new stuff. People don't want to see the same thing twice. The one way in which a place like St. John definitely is very different to a place like London is that a place like London, and indeed any big city, it's so anonymous that it kind of encourages a lot of people to be very bad at what they do. Like if you're a really, really bad plumber in England, you're going to be fine. You're going to be absolutely fine. You come to my house, right? You ruin my... This did happen, by the way. This is exactly... You come to my house, you ruin my plumbing system, right? I have a slight banging. You come in to fix that, and instead you end up like flooding the whole house, right? You make me pay you, then you walk out. Now, I might tell 1,000 people that story and tell them the guy's name. They're never going to see him. They're never going to hear from him. They're never going to... That happens here. Can you imagine if a plumber did that to you here? Everyone's going to know about it. And it's the same thing with stand-up comedy. A comedian goes and does a bad corporate gig in London, which happens all the time. They get paid huge sums of money. They go and do this thing. They die. The company goes, oh, well, that guy was terrible. I mean, they might remember his name. But they don't, even if they tell anyone, it is so many people, it's just never going to get out. I mean, a perfect example is, in England, you could go to any dinner party, sit down and start slagging off a random person you met that day, right? And no one in that room is going to know him. Here, someone in the room will be related to that person, right? Just a fact. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the wonderful thing about a place like this is if you are great at what you do, you will thrive. And this is the thing, is most people that are great at what they do here are doing well. In England, I know so many more people that are great at what they do that aren't doing well because of the fact that they can't get the name out. So it works both ways. If you're willing to work hard and be good at what you do, people will hear about it. Because the wonderful thing about a smaller, I don't mean small because it isn't small here. That's another big mistake that people make that I'll come on to later. But people do talk here, is the point. And it will get around. If you're good, people will hear. If you're bad, they'll hear. Which is why I put far, far more pressure on myself with every stand-up show I do. Because if you do well at a show, all kinds of amazing things have happened to me and for me off the back of a good show here. And my fear of having a bad show, and I have had one or two bad ones, and it really hurts when it goes badly. I had a very bad show at the Hilton last year. I had 2 shows in a night. First one went very well, second one was terrible. I made it my life's mission the next day to find everyone that was in that room and offer them free tickets to the Imperial show, just to show them that isn't how I roll. Now, obviously in London, that you wouldn't do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it is very, very important just to always be on duty. If you are building your own brand, if you are setting up your own company, you are always going to be the face of that company or the face of your own brand, and just always be aware of that. What have I missed out? So, one thing that was discussed on a podcast last week was I'd heard on the grapevine that there were other comedians within the city or province slagging me off, being critical of me or what I do, whether it be of my comedy or anything else. And I kind of couldn't figure out why. So I asked the host, and the host of this podcast had a fantastic and possibly quite realistic reason for this. He said, because you didn't start here. No one saw your struggle. You arrived here, and of course there's possibly an element of truth to that. No one saw those years of sleeping rough, literally just digging further and further into debt, being booed off stage every single night. Now, of course, when I was going through that, I was watching my friends who I'd started with evolve as comedians, get good, sell out arenas, and I was still struggling. So I understand the human nature that is to kind of want to slag those people off. But the decision I made back then was not to slag them off. It was either to reach out to them and learn from them, as you said, Don, and also just to get better, to do what they're doing, because this doesn't happen overnight. Whether it's building a business from scratch or learning an art form or anything else, nothing starts from scratch. You literally just have to just work and toil away at it, and reach out to people and learn from them rather than bitching and moaning about them, because they will hear about it because it's a small city. On the small city thing, I'll make the point that I think a mistake a lot of people make is that it's small. Now, I know this in some way contradicts what I've said, but I think you all understand what I mean, in that it is smaller, and that it's smaller in terms of we all talk and we all kind of know what's going on. But a big mistake I think people make is underestimating actually how many people there are here. I mean, to give a perfect example, I, like a lot of people, assumed that having done the Imperial twice, everyone that wanted to see me'd seen me. That's it. Everyone's sick of me. I do enough stuff around here that is everyone just sick of my face, and is the backlash going to come in? Everyone's going to go, look, just get that guy out of here. Send him back. Send him back. And I'll give you a few examples of surprising myself. And this kind of draws slightly into the social media thing. A lot of what I've talked about so far has been about, face-to-face, which is true. Of course, I do use social media for a lot of promotion and PR. But I think a very, very important point to make is you need to be doing a bit of everything. There's some people that don't do it. There's some people that only do it. And the important thing is to do all of it. I mean, if I broke down, and I haven't done the market research, but if I was to break down how I sold out, say, the first Imperial Theatre show, I'd say 10% of it might be people I know on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. I'd say 20% was probably people I met at the park. If my wife said to me, take the kids to the park, I'd be like, yeah, wait a minute. I'd stuff my pocket with flyers, and I'd go down to the park and just make sure that anyone I spoke to, I'm handing them flyers. Like, it was literally a one-on-one, grassroots, face-to-face approach. And then that, to me, is the way to do it. But never underestimate how big. We all quite often wrongly think that our Facebook circle is St. John. And it's not. It is so broad. And so, in a perfect example, my son started a new school recently, and I was at the bus stop. I've been going to the bus stop to meet him from the bus every day. There's like 6 or 7 mums there who I chat with every day, and we were chatting for about 2 weeks every day, and then after a couple of weeks, one of them said, look, we're wondering, you're obviously not from here, we've noticed the accent, yeah, well done, and where are you from, where do you live, what do you do? And I said, I'm English, moved here 2 years ago, I'm a comedian. Now, none of them had any awareness. It wasn't like they went, oh, yes, I think I saw something in KV Style. You go, you're the British guy, that comedian, moved here, right? Nothing, not a glimmer of recognition. And why should they, right? It's not their duty to know, right? I'm not the mayor. Like, it's not like they don't have to know. And it's wrong of us, and it's a mistake I think lots of business people make within the city, that they think that certain things are enough. Being in the paper occasionally and being all over Facebook, well, that's our world. But what about everybody else? What about the people that don't have time to read the newspaper, didn't listen to the radio station that day, and aren't on Facebook, right? Or aren't Facebook friends with you? There's such a broader market out there that we're not aware of. Now, all of these women, I share a sense of humour with them, we get on. They're all people that I think would enjoy my shows. Now, when this happens, it is the best thing in the world for me to hear, because my greatest fear is, of course, it's tapping out and basically ending up and oversaturating, and everyone going, like, I've had enough, I've seen him, done, don't need to see him again. That's always, as it is with every business. Every business is worried once you sell someone a car, or you sell someone this, you sell them a ticket, or you sell them an insurance policy, whatever it is, you're worried, will they come back? Will they spend more money? Now, the wonderful thing is that yes, because there are so many more people. Steve Barnes put on a big Yuck Yuck show on New Year's Eve. We were both somewhat, not hesitant, but we both thought, he's already got one massive show in December, 500 seats, 2 weeks before this show. The New Year's Eve show, the ticket price was higher. I'd just done a big show like 6 weeks before to 1,000 people. Like, can we really do this again? So we both thought, well, yes, we can, but it's going to be a push. Right, we are going to need to get out there. So we booked today to go out and hit the streets and do our grassroots one-on-one, knock on doors and say, are you aware of this show happening? Because this is another thing. A lot of this doesn't stem from a lack of belief in advertising budget. I'm not saying that advertising in the newspaper is a bad thing, or that radio ads are a bad thing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that some of us don't have the budget for it. Right? That's the simple fact of the matter. So you have to do it yourself. So anyway, we allocated this day, and within 2 weeks, these tickets went on sale. We allocated this day for kind of mid-December. Boom, the tickets sold out almost immediately, right, with hardly any promotion, hardly any PR. Basically, over the few months of shows that Steve had done, word of mouth had built up enough that by posting it on Facebook and mentioning it to a few people, word got out. And then suddenly there's people on Kijiji offering more money for these tickets. Now, not only is this amazing and just watching something build and grow like that, but also I was then worried, thinking, oh my goodness, you know, I bet all these people will have seen me before. There's going to be 400, 500 people in there. I better write some new jokes, which I did, and that's a great thing for a comedian to be forced to do that, because it's nerve-wracking to write new jokes. Again, musicians write new stuff in the studio, then go out on stage and perform it when it's perfected. We have to try that stuff when it's like the Rolling Stones don't do the first rehearsal of a new track on stage. Like, they wait till it's ready. We have to try it in front of a live audience. So I'm properly worried about this. Now, again, another odd thing that occurred was that of these 450 or so people that were in that room, I would say 90% had never seen me before. Now, again, there's me worrying, like, have I overtapped it? And I could tell by the responses to older jokes that I've done before. Like, and to me, that's the best possible thing to happen, because every single time that happens, you realize that the market is far broader and wider than we think. Let me get my glass of water. Talk amongst yourselves. I guess personally, what I'd always wanted all those years ago when I looked in that mirror on Water Street and said I want to be a stand-up comedian was that all I'd ever wanted was to make a living doing this, doing what I now do. I don't have, I mean, it obviously sounds like part of what I did was strategic. Most of it really wasn't. It wasn't like I sat down and had this big battle plan. For the most part, I just did the things that I felt were right. So it wasn't like I thought that these tours that I've started out doing would be successful. I just sat down and thought, I want to be touring. How do I tour? No one's going to be my tour manager. No big comedy agency is going to do it for me. So it just made sense to go and knock on those doors and turn up at those stages and say, hi, this is what I do. Here's a clip. Why don't you watch it? And it just made sense. It just all came organically. My aspiration and dream was always, just as I say, to make a living doing stand-up comedy. Now, I don't have a big game plan now. Like, there's not some big plan to go to Hollywood, make movies, none of that. Like, this is literally what I wanted to be. So for me, the hardest thing now, and really the thing that I have to work on that I haven't necessarily mastered in terms of personal branding, is how do I sustain what I'm doing? Like, now that I've reached the point that literally what I'm doing right now, what I did this last year and what I'm doing this year, that's what I want to be doing forever, right? There's no next step. The next step is simply working out to sustain this, which is, of course, in business and in any form of business, the hardest thing. How do you keep doing what you're doing and maintain it? The answers, obviously, are, as always, fairly obvious, you know, both from, you know, all of the same ways that you get here, which is continuing to evolve, continue to do new things, and just make sure that you're constantly reaching new markets. I mean, a lot of the time when I go and do club shows in other parts of the country, it's not for the money. There's not a lot of money in playing comedy clubs across the country. The reason I go and do them and take those gigs so seriously is I treat every one of those gigs like a job interview. If I'm going to Toronto, I'm there to basically go up there and rip the roof off and have people in that room go, we have to have that guy come and host our whatever it is, and we'll pay whatever we can to get him. Like, that's really what you're doing. You are going out there, and every single gig is a job interview, which is the same with every single meeting. I had a boss when I worked for, and I guess a lot of what I learned about public relations and so forth stemmed from my background in journalism. I worked for a magazine called GQ in London for many years, and a lot of it stemmed from being on that side and seeing how things worked there, seeing how the things that we didn't like when people would get in touch with press releases, the things that I mean, and I will give you some examples actually, which wasn't part of the plan, but it kind of makes sense. I worked for many years on the picture desk, and it was a fascinating thing that one of the most important things you can all do in your own businesses is please invest good money in good photography. It's the number one thing that you should do. And I'll give you a perfect example. if we had a travel, we had a travel section in GQ, I would be given the list of the 4 hotels that we were covering. So say we were covering, it was the 4 best hotels in Bali, say, right? We would, as the picture editor, I would phone those hotels, the marketing departments, the press offices, and I would ask for every single, we don't want your edit, we want every single photograph you've got, every single great photograph you've got of your hotel, send it. Now, if we had Hotel of the Month, and then 2 like little ones that was going to be at the bottom also, or if it's booked, try these. When those pictures came in, whichever place had the best picture, that's going double page spread, obviously. It goes without saying. We are a glossy magazine, we're an entertainment magazine, we want people to be entertained. We're not going to, someone could have stayed at the hotel, and this happened every time, and this happened with everything, cars, films, you name it. It happens all over the country, the same thing happens everywhere. Someone would go, but I stayed at that hotel, it was amazing. And I'm like, well, this is what they got. This is what they got. Rather than spending $3,000 on their photographs, they spent $500, and this is what they got. And as a result, they're not going to now get what in advertising costs would probably cost them $20,000, i.e., a double-page spread, and not even an ad, editorial. And that was something that I did very early on, was make sure I had good press shots. And what it meant was, when I was traveling around the country doing my touring shows, I might be in a town doing a show at the community theatre to 250 people. Meanwhile, some massive comedian was doing a show to 5,000 people down the road, and his press shots would be low resolution or badly shot or whatever it was, or out of date. My picture would be better, so what does the picture editor or the editor say? Well, they're like, well, which picture do we want full page inside our publication? The better picture. And I'm sorry if I am stating the obvious, but it often amazes me. It's often the biggest and best corporations that think that they don't need to spend the money on the photography. And in actual fact, that is it's the most vital thing, because you're basically sealing yourself free publicity by having good pictures. That was off the point, but maybe it wasn't. It was part of the point. How to sustain. I guess I'd like to talk somewhat about, what time is it? Do you know what time it is? I don't want to overrun. Sorry? I've got 10 minutes, right, I'll cut to the chase. I was going to talk slightly about pitching, because it relates a lot in terms of, comedy is a lot like pitching, in that when you walk out on stage in any club, theatre, wherever it is you're performing, you are essentially pitching to the audience. Now, when you come out on stage and it's your name above the door, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. And that is, of course, the bitter irony of comedy, in that suddenly, when you're actually suddenly really good at it, it's actually easier because people are there to see you. But of course, prior to that, you're coming out on stage, you're part of a bill. People have paid to see the Glee Club, or they paid to see Yuck Yucks, they paid to see whatever it is. They haven't paid to see you personally. So when you walk out on that stage, you are trying to win them over with a glance, which is kind of the same thing with pitching. You walk into a pitch, even if it's not conscious, the person you're pitching to is judging you from the second you walk in there. Every single word you say, every single movement you make. I'll give you an example of how these things can change an outcome. There's a club in England called the Glee Club, which, interestingly, great David and Goliath story. They actually sued Fox, who make Glee, because of Glee Club, and won. Because clearly, when they launched the TV show Glee, and again, interesting small business thing, like when Fox obviously started, of course one of the Fox lawyers would have Googled Glee Club. Of course they would have seen there was a chain of 5, the best comedy clubs in England, the 5 comedy clubs in England, which to me, they're the greatest clubs in the world, but to Fox, it's this tiny little thing. They, of course, saw that and went, whatever, Glee Club it is, right? And because of that simple fact that decision would have been made, they were able to sue Fox and got so much money. And what did they do with that money? They paid their comedians more and opened more clubs. Wonderful people. Anyway, love them. Now, it was kind of like... Yuck Yucks, in the usual thing, you turn up on a Thursday and you basically do Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. If one of those shows sells out, sometimes they do two shows a night. But basically, it's 400 people every night. their Birmingham club was known as the best club in the country because they basically at one point refurbed it, weren't happy with it, and decided to, and comedians always like to complain, like we always complain, oh, the seats are too high, the ceiling's too low, the stage is this. The Glee, what they did was they called in comedians and said, look, you guys design it. Where should the soundboard be? How high should the stage be? Where should the bar be? So it's designed by comedians. So it's basically the best club, not only in the country, possibly in the world. And I hear a lot of Canadian comedians who've been to England say the same thing. Now, I went out on the Friday night. I'd done the Thursday night. It was fine, normal kind of thing. Friday night, I go out on the stage. So it's the same bill all weekend. You all go up. There's an MC. There's 3 acts. I was on in the middle. The MC gives me an introduction. I go out Friday night, have one of the best gigs in my life up to that point. This was about 2009. Absolute, just one of those glorious, like, pick up the mic, everyone's with me. Just magical, magical nights. And again, you only do 20 minutes in England. Just perfect. I had a 20-minute set planned, only did about 10 minutes of it because the laughter was so big that I couldn't, but you know, it was just a magic. I come off stage, I'm buzzing all day, walking around Birmingham that whole day, the whole Saturday, just so happy. Finally feeling like a true comedian, like finally feel like I could go play, that this is it for me. Arrive at the club Saturday night, same thing, sold out, 400 people, same MC, same introduction, same everything. Walk out, have one of the biggest deaths of my life. Right? Now, normally when that happens, you would go, oh, it's because the room wasn't right for me, or the MC messed up my intro, or something or other. But there's but every other act did well. There's no rhyme, no reason to why this happened. I can't put my finger on it. And with the benefit of hindsight, I now realize what I did wrong. It was all in that brief walkout. On the Friday, when I walked out on that stage, I obviously had the right mix of confidence that I can do this, combined with vulnerability and somewhat, relatability, right? Now, having spent all of Saturday walking around going, fuck yeah, I'm a fucking yes, right? I'm the man, right? Now, clearly, when I walked out on that stage on Saturday night, even though I wasn't walking out going, right? Even though I wasn't doing that, they could sense a bit of arrogance about me. When I came out and pulled the mic up, there was probably a bit less of this and a bit more of this, right? Okay. Now and audiences sense that. Audiences can smell that stuff like shit on a toothbrush. It is just like they can see it, and as a result, on the final night when I walked out, everyone in that room went, oh my God, love this guy. We're with him for the journey. On the Saturday night, everyone in that room went, hate this guy. Just hate him. And as a result, nothing I could say or do was going to make them laugh. Now, as I said, the Friday night I got halfway through my set, realized I was over the 20 minutes. That's how big the laughs were. The Saturday night I did my whole 20-minute set, realized I was probably under, added 3 extra bits, then came off, and the MC goes, what the hell are you doing? You've only done 14 minutes. That's how few laughs there were. Now, again, something about that way, and I guess what I'm trying to say is demeanor is everything. When you're walking into those pitches, when you're walking into those meetings, how you walk in, if you can G yourself up too much, it's possible to be standing in the mirror beforehand going, I can do this, yes. And if you walk into a pitch like this, no one's going to give you the money, right? That's not how it's going. No one's going to invest in, no one's going to do anything. So anyway, we have to wrap up. So what I want to say is 2 things before I go very quickly. One is it's very important to know when to give back, both to especially in a community like this where literally it is the community itself that actually builds you up to where you are. It's the community that does it. It's nothing else. It's support of people. So for me, the reason that I organise charity events myself was simply, I guess, born somewhat out of frustration when you do what I do for a living, you get asked to do a lot of fundraiser events, all the rest of it, and quite often you get asked to do events where you agree to do it because it's a cause that you believe in, and you show up and you're giving your time obviously for nothing, but you show up and you kind of discover that everybody else in the room is getting paid and you're not. And that, like, so you're like, oh, right, so the caterers, oh no, they're getting paid in full, right? And everyone's, and so the reason I do organise charity events myself is that my ethos with any event I put on is every single cent goes, like, there's no one's getting paid. That way there's no confusion, there's no misunderstanding, and that's really why I ended up kind of adding that extra kind of stress to my life, was that I just wanted to be able to put on events where I go, well, guess what? You buy a ticket for $25, $25 is going to the charity. There's no grey area. The final thing I wanted to do was actually to make an announcement about something that I'm working on now. Obviously, most of what I do is born out of a passion of loving this city and loving not only, I mean, obviously, I loved it before I moved here, but I would say when I moved here, I was aware of about 10% of the awesomeness that would actually transpire here. Like, I really was very ill-educated about the place. And obviously I liked it enough to want to pack up everything, leave my friends, my family, my job, my career, everything behind, and come and take a huge risk. I loved it enough for that. But I'd say my surprise has been 90% more. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is a film project with the filmmaker Greg Hemmings, who again is someone that, he's obviously born here and has built up an amazing business here, has done businesses elsewhere, but chooses to work out of here because he loves it so much. He has been commissioned to make a documentary about St. John through my eyes. Essentially, what I love about the city, the things that we know about St. John, and why there's something really exciting and special happening here right now. So for the average person watching that show, whether they be in Halifax or Vancouver or wherever they are, for people watching that film, they might think this is the drive-by city. People in other parts of the province still think it stinks. They still have an idea of what it was 50 years ago. It's an odd, weird thing. So the film obviously has a few facets. We're hoping that people will see it and want to come and visit and come here on holiday, as I used to do before I lived here. We're hoping that people will want to come and do business here. And essentially, it's showing what my life is here now, showing the things that we know and love, because it's the stuff that doesn't get out. The stuff that, the Port City Royals and organisations like this, and the architecture and the views and all the things that we know, the things that we want the rest of the country and the world to see. Now, all of that obviously is a very cool documentary, and it's a thing for us, and we're going to be very proud of that. What I wanted, though, was for it to have a proper ending. I also wanted to put my money where my mouth is, because I'm always saying anything's possible here. That's my catchphrase, anything's possible here. If you're good at what you do and you're willing to work at it, anything's possible. So what I've managed to do in my career is come here and sustain what I did in England. I made a living doing comedy. I've sustained what I did. Everyone said I couldn't, and I came and did it. So what I now want to do is take it to the next level and do something here that I was never going to be able to do in England. I honestly felt like my ship had sailed in that respect. Friends of mine, like Michael McIntyre, who'd gone on to sell out arenas, that wasn't going to happen for me. So what I've done, what the crux of this film is going to be, is that I have booked Harbour Station for the 28th of April, and I'm going to do my first ever arena show here in St. John. Right? Okay? Now, the risk factor in this film is real, right? Like, this is my money that's going into, entering this thing. Thanks to wonderful sponsors like Lexus and Toyota, who are supporting me and helping make this happen. For the most part, it's my money going into this. Now, so the Harbour Station thing, the risk factor and the fear is real. Like, this is not me, and the show is going to be called James Mullinger, Anything is Possible, right? Now, and obviously what I'm hoping is I'm not proved wrong. I'm hoping that my whole ethos of anything's possible doesn't turn out to be completely wrong, and actually I'm wrong, and I lose my home because maybe Michael let me sleep in Harbour Station the night of the gig if I do lose my home. Who knows? But my plan is to bring the ultimate celebration of St. John to Harbour Station that night. It's going to be my only full-length public stand-up show in St. John this year. That's one of the marketing not tricks, but marketing factors with the show. I'm going to be writing a lot of new material for it, but essentially it's going to be a huge celebration of the city. And my hope is that the end of this film, where we've talked to lots of people within the community, people that have helped make this community what it is, my hope is that at the end of this film, I'm walking out on stage in front of 5,000 people, having broken Jerry Seinfeld's 4,800, and not that I'm competitive, and come out and send the message to the rest rest of not just the Maritimes, not just Atlantic Canada, but all of Canada, and of course internationally as well. That not only is this a great place to come and visit, not only is this a great place to come and do business, but it's a great place for performers to come. And really, Guns N' Roses have just reformed, and I want them to come back to Harbour Station. That's really what this is all about. But thanks very much for listening. Anything is possible. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks, James. Amazing. So thank you so much, James, for doing this for us. The inspiration is to get entrepreneurs thinking outside the box, thinking globally, thinking locally. You can check out the flyers over there for the rest of the year. Lots of interesting topics in around idea generation and how to be an entrepreneur in this crazy town. So we hope that you go to James's show, of course, when it is coming. And if you have any interest in joining the Vennture Garage or anything to do with ESJ, our cards are over on the deck there. And please, please, please get in touch. We want to see our city grow and prosper as much as possible. So thank you all for coming so much. And have a great day.